Today marks 58 years since the passage of the Voting Rights Act. It outlawed the discriminatory voting practices adopted in many southern states after the Civil War. WRAL's Laura Levine explains how it has transformed through the years.
On this day 58 years ago, voting became possible for everyone. The Voting Rights of 1965 really reshaped history, but a lot has changed since then. Rollbacks such as requiring proof of ID at the polls is just one example of many barriers still being presented today. The landmark 1965 law is one of the most successful civil rights measures in history. After decades of activism, those who were insisting on their right to participate on equal terms in their democracy won.
As soon as it went into place, it was immediately contested. And it has been contested since.
I spoke with Chris Shenton, a voting rights lawyer at Southern Coalition for Social Justice, about the ongoing challenges. When you look at the laws in place that are supposed to protect voters, how have they changed?
They've changed dramatically in the last few years. Another decision of the United States Supreme Court from 10 years ago, Shelby County, struck down the core provision of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And the aftermath of that decision is still being felt today in a very profound way. Like here in North Carolina, the day that that decision was announced, the legislature here passed what they called the full bill. So they rolled out a bunch of provisions that they had up to that point thought they could not pass legally, and which had a devastating impact on all voters, but particularly voters of color here in North Carolina.
He says from there, they targeted early voting and voter ID laws, to list a few.
There is still a lot left to do, and here in North Carolina in particular, we see threats, even right now as we are speaking over on Jones Street at the legislature, to our right to vote, and certainly that's a concern for us.
Bob Phillips is the executive director of Common Cause NC, a nonpartisan grassroots organization dedicated to upholding the core values of democracy.
We're engaging in what we call a Unite NC tour all across the state, trying to make sure everybody understands what indeed is happening in Raleigh and make sure their voices are heard. We always say that the most powerful voice in the hallways of the legislature is actually the people. Their voice really does matter, but the lawmakers representing them have to hear their voices.
When a state Supreme Court ruling approved a photo ID law for this year's election, advocates say it will have a drastic impact on those who may not have a DMV in their county, the elderly and underrepresented communities.
It seems that some of the lawmakers are pushing harmful legislation because they have bought in to this election denier narrative. And we've got to all push back and fight and make sure that, again, voting continues to be easy and accessible for all.
Where do you see the future of the Voting Rights Act?
I think it will continue to be driven ultimately by the people who insisted, the same kinds of people who won the protections of the Voting Rights Act to begin with.
Laura Levine, WRAL News in Raleigh.